Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined today by Toby Rowland, the voice of the Oklahoma Sooners. Until June, he also co-hosts the T-Row in the Morning Show on the Ref 1400 AM. And then in July, and correct me if I'm wrong, Toby, taking over as the sports director at News 9 in Oklahoma City. You sound like a busy man, Toby. A lot going on there. Well, but for our purposes, he's been on the ground with the Oklahoma Sooners during their inaugural trip through SEC baseball. And I'd love to pick his brain about how that has gone from his perspective and talk a little bit about the team. That's I found out firsthand, a lot of fun to watch. Saw them in Columbia last weekend and enjoyed my time. We'll get to a lot of that stuff here in just a second. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. After that long preamble, Toby, I appreciate you joining us today.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you, Joe.
First off, actually, a little bit of a different question here than maybe what I usually start with. I was listening to your broadcast of the game, and I would highly encourage anybody, if you're out driving around, fire up that, like I do, the Varsity Network app and pull up the Oklahoma broadcast. They do a fantastic job. But the Friday game of the Vanderbilt series, you guys broadcasted from the right field seats.
Right.
How did that idea come about, and what was that experience like?
We've been talking about doing a Harry Carey-esque outfield bleachers broadcast for many years. This year, Oklahoma added what they call Section 405 in right field. Not too dissimilar from what Tennessee had before their renovations, where there's a couple of rows of seats that sit right on top of the right field wall. And it's fun. I mean, there's conversations back and forth with the right fielder, as you can imagine, all night long, and home runs fly in there frequently. And so as soon as Section 405 was built this year, we said, well, we got to do it. We got to do a broadcast from outfield this year. And we did. It was great. We had a home run, almost hit my engineer in the head about 6 feet to my left. Of course, Oklahoma won the game, and we'll definitely be doing that again.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to listen to, because it was, all of the usual stuff you like about listening to baseball on the radio, the sounds of the game, all that stuff. But also you could hear the fans around you. Yeah. It was like there was just talk about some good natural sound. It was just a lot of fun to listen to.
It wasn't always appropriate what got over the airwaves for sure. But I'll tell you, it was difficult. We had a real appreciation for the right fielder looking into the sun the first couple of innings, because we were in right field, and it was really hard to tell balls and strikes and what was going on at home plate out there. But eventually the sun went down, and it was a good time.
We'll have to get you a little brand deal, Toby, next year to get you like a fresh new glove out there. I
like it.
Whatever it takes to get you ready for the home run next time Jacob Humphrey comes to bat and hits one over there. It was Jacob Humphrey, right? Is that right?
It was Jacob Humphrey. Yeah. Okay. It would have been a lot of pressure if we had caught that to throw the ball back. Right. I wish it had been a Sooner. That would have made it simpler.
That's right. Yeah. You just keep it and celebrate it. What has impressed you most about the team this season from your eyes, where you sit?
I think we knew, or at least we thought we knew coming into the year, that the pitching was solid with the Witherspoon twins and Cade Crossland coming in and Dylan Crooks coming back. And they've been great. They've been really good. I think the bats have been better than maybe us and the experts anticipated going into the year. There's been more power than we anticipated. And I mean, you look at OU's hit 50 home runs, which is still, I think, bottom half of the SEC, but they're on pace to hit more home runs this year than that 2022 team did that played for the national championship. And that was Peyton Graham and Jimmy Crooks and Jackson Nicholas. And I mean, there was a lot of power on that team, relatively speaking. And so the fact that they've hit as many home runs as they have, and the weather is just now warming up. I mean, Eldell Mitchell Park becomes a small ballpark when the weather heats up and the wind starts blowing out of the south, is surprising to me. I think we knew they would steal bases, but we're talking about a team now with the best on-base percentage in SEC play. The top two guys, I think they're second best as a team. They've got the top two individuals in that category. And they've hit 26 of their 50 home runs against SEC competition. So I think what the bats have done has been what has maybe been surprising to me this year, pleasantly so.
One thing you always hear about with coaches in the SEC is yes, the talent on the field is an adjustment if you're coming from a different league, and that's no disrespect to the Big 12, a very good baseball league in its own right. But coaches will tell you it's sometimes less that and more about just the grind of week after week and no weeks off, and even in a situation like Oklahoma had last weekend where you've got a Mizzou team that's just fighting it, they're injured, they're struggling, whatever. But outside of that, it's just wave on wave every week of just the physicality and the speed of the game. How much was that talked about by this Oklahoma coaching staff, far as you can tell, going into the season? And how do you think they've dealt with it?
I think it was talked about by fans and media a bunch. I don't know that the coaches really played it up that much. I don't think they necessarily wanted to try to intimidate their own team going into a season. My impression has been that they've handled it well. And for Oklahoma and Texas, it is definitely the best conference. The SEC is definitely the best conference, and nobody's going to argue that. Just look at the last several national champions. However, the Big 12, what TCU and Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, and Texas was in that conference too, have done the last decade or so, they've been really, really good. And they have had high round draft picks, Luke and Bakers of the world and all those sluggers that Texas Tech's had. And I feel like every OSU outfielder has been 6'6" or taller the last 10 years. And Texas is Texas. Oklahoma has faced high-level competition, and Texas has faced high-level competition in the Big 12. What you mentioned, though, about the week in, week out is the difference in this conference. You had 9 weeks in the Big 12, and there was a bye in there somewhere, literally a bye, where you would play a non-conference series. And there was always a Kansas or a Kansas State that was having a down year. Baylor's had a couple. And that's just, there's no off weeks in this conference. And while Missouri is down, the next team at the bottom of the league is South Carolina, and we saw them firsthand, and they're really good. So that's the difference. I think probably the biggest difference, though, because Oklahoma's played a lot of SEC teams recently, and Skip Johnson is well above 500 against them. And it's been, whether it's Houston or Arlington early in the year or the NCAA tournament, the Texas A&Ms of the world. In Florida, they won the Gainesville Regional. Florida, they beat Texas A&M twice in Omaha. LSU. I mean, it's been Tennessee. They beat Tennessee last year. It's been the cream of the crop. But the crowds and atmospheres are massively different in this conference. And I think that's been the biggest change, more so than even the talent, has been every stadium you go into, every atmosphere you go into is equal to or better than every atmosphere you would have seen in the Big 12 conference. And that's fun too. I mean, that sometimes that elevates the visiting team's play because they're excited to not be going to Kansas in front of 200 people. Now they're having a great year this year, I understand, but I'm talking about, when they're down, or Missouri like it was this week, they're excited to go play in some big time college baseball atmospheres. So yes, talent better, all those things you hear about the SEC, no doubt. But I think it's the crowds and the atmospheres and the fans and how much they care about it that has been really the biggest change, and it's a lot of fun.
On the field, lineup wise, I know Skip's talked about this quite a bit, but just, it lost a decent bit from that team last season. And yet, to your point, it feels like they mostly have filled those holes pretty effectively. But Easton, Carmichael, Jaxon, Willits back in the lineup, how big have they been as just kind of heartbeats of the lineup and carryover from what they did last year?
Yeah, they're the stabilizing forces. They're the known commodity that you had coming back this year. Oklahoma needed them to have the kind of years they're having this year, so that if you had a piece or two that you brought in the transfer portal that didn't work, you knew you could count on Willits and Carmichael. They've been great, both batting, mid 300s with 10 home runs for Carmichael and 9 for Willits. They're top 2 in the team in RBIs. So they have been exactly what Oklahoma needed them to be, for sure. And Easton has really been asked to go above and beyond, because the plan was for him to split time at catcher with Scott Mudler just to save himself and Mudler got injured early in SEC play, and Carmichael has had to be the everyday catcher, both ends of the doubleheader against Missouri. And he's a very good catcher. He's tremendously athletic. He made a unbelievable play against Vanderbilt last week behind the plate. But they wanted him to not have to carry that entire workload, and he's had to for much of this year.
Drew Dickerson was a freshman who came in with a lot of acclaim, a little bit of a slow start, but lately seems like he's maybe figured some things out. What have you observed about him and the way he's been able to kind of come on strong the last few weeks?
Tremendous power, swings from his heels every time. There was not really a position for him, and he was struggling with some things in that regard defensively. So they have had to use him so far, and I think that'll change in the future, but they've had to use him so far in the DH role. And Dasan Harris has also been very good for Oklahoma. He's a left-handed hitter. So for much of the year, Dickerson a righty, Harris a lefty have kind of platooned at DH. Early in the year, it was Carmichael that would play some DH when Mudler would catch. So playing time was a little hard to come by. His strikeouts were a little higher than you'd want him early in the year. But the more and more playing time he has gotten, the more comfortable he has been. And he's not going to get cheated. And if he makes contact, he's going to hit it hard somewhere. That home run he hit at Missouri, I don't know if it's landed yet. And he's a Missouri kid, so I think it was an extra incentive for him to play well up in Columbia. But the future looks, you're very excited about Drew Dickerson. His size, when he steps into the batter's box, he looks like an SEC body should look. I mean, he's a big, strong, right-handed kid with power. So hopefully the defensive element to that comes along, and he can be an everyday lineup guy next year.
Trey Gamble's been one of my favorite players to watch in the SEC this year because I'm a sucker for a guy who's just going to stand up there and take borderline pitches and foul some stuff off and basically tell the pitcher, I got all day. I'm just going to stand here and keep fighting. He struck out, use this anecdote as a way to ask you about him. When he struck out 3 times in the first game of the doubleheader against Missouri, to use a quote from the great Clark Griswold, I'd be less surprised if I'd woke up with my head stapled to the carpet than watch Trey Gamble strike out 3 times in a game, because that's just what he's done extremely well this year. But all that is to say, like, how special is just what he brings to the table as a guy who never strikes out, takes his walks, has a little pop too, by the way, 2 home run game over the weekend. Like, it's just been a lot of fun to watch him play. Yeah.
There are some guys that when they strike out looking, your first instinct is, I bet the ump missed that one. They just don't. They have such a sense for the strike zone. I remember Joey Votto. I'm a big Reds fan. If Joey Votto struck out looking, you could bet the ump probably missed the call. But Trey Gamble and Sam Christensen, I would put in the same category. We live in a day and age where you have to hit in the transfer portal. And OU applied maybe a few more resources to the pitching side of things than the hitting side of things. Intentionally so. They felt like they needed a strong stable of arms in the SEC, and I think they're right. But when you do that, you have to hit on the bats that you bring in. And these are not guys from big Power 5 schools. They're from junior colleges in Utah and in Arizona that Reggie Willits and Todd Butler and Skip Johnson did tremendous homework on to find a couple of diamonds in the rough, and they have been immediate starters from day one. Opening day was a doubleheader against Lehigh, and I believe Trey Gamble reached all 10 at-bats in the doubleheader. And we didn't know his name before then. We didn't know who Trey Gamble was. And he reaches all 10 at-bats, and you're like, all right, I like this guy. Dickerson has led or been near the top of the SEC in walks. His on-base percentages, not Dickerson, Christensen is very high too. So those 2 guys are both lefties. They got a little bit of pop. They hit for average. They take a ton of walks. And they've been really nice finds for this lineup for sure.
Flipping over to the mound, I guess my first question is, do you ever pinch yourself just realizing you get to watch Kyson pitch every week? Because that seems like a real treat.
It's a treat. We've been blessed with some Jonathan Grays and Cade Hortons and now Kyson Witherspoon around here the last decade or so. And, you got a young man who last year was good, but he wasn't this. And you could see the future he could turn into this. And to watch Skip mold him into a surefire first round, probably top 10 draft pick has been really fun. And the same thing is happening with Malachi too. I don't know if you were there for the final game, but Malachi's on his way. He's getting better and better. And I know you didn't ask me about Malachi, but the raw stuff might be even better for Malachi than it is for Kyson once he gets the pitchability aspect to it. But they're both tremendous. Their mom raised them. She's a single mom, raised them. She moved here from Florida, from Northwest Florida State. Again, a couple of junior college finds that Oklahoma went out and found. And mom moved here, and it's an unbelievable family. And Kyson is just, every time out, it's going to be a quality start. He's probably going to give up 2 runs or less, strike out about 10, and he's going to give you a chance to win. And he's got 2 losses on the year, and that was games in which he gave up 1 earned run in each, and he just got outpitched by Cade Anderson and who was the other one? It was Mississippi State. Pico Khan. Yeah, they were better that night. But even in those 2 losses, he was great. So I can't wait to see what he does the rest of the year. But especially at the next level, I think he's going to be another great representative of the University of Oklahoma.
If I were a recruiting coordinator at another SEC or Big 12 schools, my whole entire strategy, given the success, might just be to follow around the Oklahoma coaching staff to junior colleges, because chances are they're onto something.
Well, I mean, it's kind of what you got to do right now, because you look at the transfers that the LSUs and Tennessees and Arkansas of the world are getting, and it's for the most part high Division I prospects from other schools, or they were youngsters, not necessarily prospects. And so if you're Oklahoma, that's not, if you're competing in the recruiting trail with the LSUs and Tennessees and Arkansas of the world, with the facilities they have right now, that's hard. And so you've got to be really good at finding diamonds in the rough and development. And that's where this coaching staff has excelled. That team that almost won the national championship was made up of a bunch of guys like that, who were either transfers or high school guys that were overlooked. And the development Skip Johnson and Reggie Willits and Russell Raley and Todd Butler have done has been tremendous.
You alluded to a little bit talking about Malachi, but where's the coaching staff at with Crossland and Malachi Witherspoon to support Kyson? It sounds like with Malachi in particular, he's coming on strong, but how satisfied have they been with the rest of the rotation?
Yeah, I think they're happy. I think that Crossland was injured when the year started, and so he started the year in the bullpen. Gradually, I think 3 or 4 weeks in, moved to the Tuesday midweek guy, couple of starts there, and then he got moved into the weekend rotation. Cam Johnson was originally in the weekend rotation, and he's had a hard time since week 4 or 5 throwing strikes, and he fell out. But Crossland is a guy that when they got him, they felt like he had a chance to be a dude, a weekend rotation guy, potentially a high round draft pick guy. And he's gotten better and better and better as the year's gone along. I don't think he had his best stuff Thursday at Missouri. Credit them. They fouled off a ton of pitches against him, but he was tremendous the week before against Vanderbilt. And from the left side, when he's at his best, 95-mile-an-hour fastball with 2 breaking pitches that he can command. He has the potential to be maybe a late season surge guy like Oklahoma had with David Sandlin and Cade Horton 3 years ago. Guys that got better and better. Nobody really heard about them until it was postseason time. I think Cade Crossland could be one of those guys. Everybody knows who Malachi Witherspoon is. For him, it has been a control situation. He was the closer last year. So he's moved into the starting role. And I don't necessarily even mean walking guys. He has done that more than Kyson, but his command of the strike zone isn't as precise. So he may throw it 98 compared to Kyson's 97, but Kyson's 97 is on the black and Malachi's down the middle, and it gets hit. And so that has been what has been coming along for him. I think he was the best starter they had this weekend against Missouri. The weekend before against Vanderbilt, he got hit a little bit. The weekend before that, he was tremendous against LSU. So I think that as he continues to be refined, this is the first year he's been a starting pitcher. As he continues to be refined, I wouldn't be surprised at all if by the end of the year or even in pro ball, Malachi doesn't end up being as good or maybe even better. I also wonder, I've theorized all year, does it hurt him to go second? You know, when you see 7 innings of Kyson, here comes literally the same pitcher. I mean, they're twins. They're identical twins. And any pitcher, after you've seen them for 7 or 8 innings, you have a better feel for them, no matter how good they are. So does it hurt Malachi a little bit that you've already seen Kyson for a long time? I don't know. Maybe there's nothing to that, but it seems to make sense in my head.
Yeah, mine as well. That's interesting, and something that I don't know that any other coaching individual in baseball has had to contend with, to be honest. Right. But yeah, that's something you're if you have those two guys, you're willing to deal with that possibility.
Right.
Jason Bowden has one guy in the bullpen who's interesting to me because it seemed like numbers wise, at least, it was a little bit of a tough start. His numbers in SEC play, though, are excellent. Early on, was it just a matter of a couple bad outings that maybe made the numbers look rough? What was going on there with Jason Bowden, and what is he now?
He had bad luck early in the year. He's got a tremendous sinker, and Skip loves him in situations where you need a ground ball, potentially a double play or whatever. And he gets a ton of ground balls and a ton of double plays. But early in the year, those ground balls were finding holes on him. And sometimes he would be brought in a bases loaded situation or a couple of guys on, and some runs would pile up on him. Yeah, he's been great. He had a little bit of an issue a couple of weeks ago, and until then, he was leading the league in appearances. We called him Everyday Bowden because it felt like every game, and literally every game for a while, Skip would use him. But between him from the right side and Jamie Hitt from the left side, as setup men for Dylan Crooks, it's been a really effective combination for them.
My last thing here actually is on Cam Johnson, who you mentioned earlier. Obviously, the quality of his arm talent is such that you want to find something for him as the season goes on. Do you have a feel for, in an ideal world, how they would use him moving forward, understanding that, you know, the command is going to kind of come and go maybe, but you want to get something out of somebody who's got that electricity there?
Sure. I don't think they're giving up on him at all. I hate to keep referencing the team, that 2022 team, but Cade Horton had command problems to the point where he couldn't get more than a couple innings out of a start. I remember midway through the season, they started him against Oklahoma State on a Sunday, and he got shelled and chased in the first inning. He was wild. He walked a ton of guys, but Skip kept working with him, and it clicked in the last week of the season, and then he became a top 10 pick in the draft because of what he did in postseason. I don't know if that's going to happen for Cam Johnson, but nobody is arguing, he has electric stuff. Big time fastball, big time breaking ball. It's all about being able to throw strikes. And early in the year, we saw him do it. And we saw him have 4, good to really good starts for this team. And then he had a bad one, and it obviously has affected him probably more so between the years since then than not. I believe if there's any coach in America that can get him straightened out again, it's the one he's pitching for. So I think Skip is determined to work with him. And if it's not this year, it'll be next year. But he's hoping this year he can become probably most likely a left-handed specialist out of the bullpen. Probably. But we'll see. You never know when you get into postseason play, a prolonged regional, when you might need an extra arm, and he's a pretty good weapon to roll out. And even if you roll him out there in the first inning and he's ineffective, it's worth the gamble as long as you don't dig too big of a hole. So I think that the plan is, let's keep seeing if we can refine him and still have him be a weapon for this team before the year's over.
Yeah, and what a luxury to have is someone who you're just kind of, it's a little bit of found money if he ends up,
right.
It ends up being something that can be a real, ends up being an impact guy when we get to postseason time. And I think that's a good place to end that there, because I think that's one of the things that's been impressive to me about this team is that, they're a number of things that haven't gone quite right, exactly right, and yet this team continues to plug along and is right there in the SEC and winning a bunch of ball games. And Toby Rowland is calling those wins for the Oklahoma Sooners. I highly recommend, as I do, firing up that Varsity Network app on the weekends and listening to Toby and his crew call Sooners games. Toby, once again, I appreciate you joining us today.
My pleasure, Joe. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the season.
You as well. That is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors and Tecovas Boots, our sponsors for this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Thank you again to the voice of the Oklahoma Sooners, Toby Rowland, and thank you, the listeners, for listening. We'll talk to you.